A highly infectious coronavirus mutation has reached Australia, this time identified in Queensland. The new strain, which has forced several countries to close its borders, including South Africa, was picked up in hotel quarantine.
A pandemic warning shot for the Sunshine State.
This will be the first positive case of the South African variant in Australia.
The highly infectious mutation responsible for a recent surge in global cases detected in Brisbane hotel quarantine, a returned overseas traveller testing positive just 3 days before Christmas.
But what this positive case reaffirms is that it is really important that we maintain our strong hotel quarantine position.
The woman has been transferred to Sunshine Coast University Hospital. Health authorities are confident the threat is contained.
We are absolutely confident that all proper measures were taken.
The consequences of an outbreak have been made clear in South Africa, where more than 1 million cases have been confirmed. A recent surge blamed on the new variant, which spreads more quickly but doesn't appear to result in a more severe disease. The mutation first appeared in November, prompting several countries, including Germany, to restrict travel.
The risk, unfortunately, over the last few months has escalated. We are seeing more and more positive cases.
A second virus variant quickly spreading through England has already reached Australia. Queensland determined it won't take any chances.
The exemptions that will be given will be even fewer than before. We cannot allow people to quarantine elsewhere other than hotel quarantine or in a hospital.
Rochelle Murdoch, Sky News.
And with those stories, we can see that despite our best hopes, 2021 is shaping up as being a difficult period for the country. We cannot expect just by flipping over the calendar that New Year's Eve and we'll suddenly have a brand new world. I thought we'd talk to psychiatrist Tanveer Ahmed just about some of the ways of people coping with some of this latest news and the degree of uncertainty as we go forward. I know traditionally New Year is a sign of all optimism and making resolutions. But Tanveer, this time around, I guess mental health's really front and centre again, isn't it? We spoke about it before Christmas.
Look, you're absolutely right, Catherine. I mean, New Year's is often about long-term goals, and we know the stereotype, be it sort of gym memberships, diets, etc. Often people sort of reevaluate their relationships. So, for example, divorce. I know family lawyers talk about divorce, have a very busy time come January, February as well. So traditionally, New Year's is about long-term goals, but we live in the time of COVID. So it's very difficult to plan for long-term goals. So we have to rethink those kind of things. And I think we're also at a time where we can reflect. I mean, much like Christmas, New Year's is also a time for renewal and reflection. And I think all of us this year have had to reset rituals. We've had a whole new sets of rituals, and we've had things we value. So in some ways, we can actually reassess, are there some rituals that I've begun this year that I want to keep? And likewise, reevaluate the things I, attach the most value to, which I may not have realised in the past. So that's where, in the same way that New Year's is something of an audit, much like birthdays, there's something like a self-audit, and we take a break from our kind of rush-a-day, busy routines and reflect and set long-term goals. So really, I think the key difference here is it's very difficult to make long-term goals. And we can still make goals, but I think we'd have to consider them in very short-term framework. But also, we lose a bit of the illusion of control. And I think that's something that COVID has really pushed, particularly on such a prosperous, peaceful and healthy place that Australia tend to be. I mean, a lot of the world have sort of always lived in a sense of a degree of chaos or a lack of control or expect adversity. I mean, that's how a lot of the world lives now and has lived throughout much of history. So we've sort of inherited a little bit of that. I think we're still obviously much better off than most of the world, but we've inherited a little bit of how most people, both throughout history and still currently, live, with a sense of adversity, a lack of control, and not being able to be can't really convince ourselves or can't really trick ourselves into thinking that we can somehow control things into the longer term, Catherine.
I guess the other thing that might end up being a folly in these sorts of times, Tanveer, would be making bold resolutions. You know, people who feel terrible that they've put on a few kilos during lockdown, or they've been a bit isolated and haven't trained as hard as they might, and so on. Is this a time to maybe be a little bit realistic and not too hard on ourselves going forward? Without
look, absolutely, Catherine.
Do you think that's valid?
Now, I mean, at the same time, you know, you can still retain good habits, you know, be it around exercise, be it around social life, be it around new learning. But at the same time, yeah, I do think many of us, you know, we live in a very driven, achievement and self-oriented society. We traditionally have. The hope is that, you know, some of our goals may not be quite as much about the elevation of the self, and maybe it will help us look around a bit more and, you know, help us learn or retain some of ideally the stronger connections we may have fulfilled this year with community and place, with our families, with the balance between sort of caring for others and kind of the striving for self. So there's a lot of those things where I think, you know, people are still in this re-evaluation mode. So look, if, in terms of setting goals, the New Year's resolution should be short-term. They should be done, I mean, they're always done with a degree of, not so much cynicism, but with a degree of doubt about them. But I think this time in particular, where there's so much uncertainty, and what happens, that we really can't tell what's going to happen in 2 or 3 months, let alone 6 to 12 months. So that should temper any sort of, you know, as you say, being too harsh on ourselves regarding any goals. And also possibly even long-term decisions. I mean, oh no. Are you there, Catherine?
Yes, I am, Tanveer, and just one final one, just a couple of quick tips. Do you think some of this uncertainty, I hate to say it given that we actually are in the news business, but are people perhaps consuming too much catastrophic news and it's actually impacting them and raising their anxiety levels? Should they maybe allocate a bit of time to just stay abreast of the vital news and leave their screens alone for a while?
Look, I think this time, regardless of whether it's COVID or not, is a time to reset and stop. You know, that element of rest, I mean, there is a sacred element to that. Traditionally, it was held through religion where it was designated as sacred. And I think even in, you know, in secular lives, we need to hold some really strong boundaries and retain a degree of are you there, Catherine? Sorry.
Still here, Tanveer, and you're coming through fine, so...
No, apologies. So, look, I think regardless of whether it's COVID or not, that time to reflect and stop is actually really critical for human health, and we actually rarely do it. And often new insights, not just about, whether it be about business, society, and our lives in general, come from these moments. That clarity often comes from these periods of not so much isolation, but sometimes where you're alone, you've stopped your usual routines. This is often when, not only is it when we it's a bit like sleep, where your brain kind of processes and almost sets in and establishes kind of memories and associations. It's like you kind of really put down new foundations. And I think we need to do that in almost a bigger way this year, because we've taken so much in this year. And I think there's a lot of new knowledge and new insights that will come and that are coming. But they don't easily come if you just retain your usual routine.
Well, all good points, Tanveer, and thank you for persevering through those technical glitches. That was all gold and it'll help a lot of people. So best for 2021. We'll talk again soon.